Welcome painters, today we will continue with the second video about painting a blood angel. Today I will use the brush, so if you're ready, let's go for it. We finished the airbrush process, so next we will use the brush to add definition to the whole figure. The first thing is to apply the shadows. I'll take some dark Prussian blue and black. I put both colors on the palette, and I will use a super thin Artist Opus brush, 00. I add some water to the colors and mix them. Why do I use blue? Because blue is a cold color. It will add depth. So I'm going to apply these shadows, especially in the grooves. We have to define every armor plate. So we take a little paint, add more water. The paint must flow more than when highlighting. And I am applying this mixture in the grooves. I recommend a very fine brush with a good tip. You will find it much easier to apply the shadows. Notice that I rest the brush and then drag the paint. We have to apply very thin layers as the airbrush work is very thin. If we apply thick paint, the difference will be noticeable. I will take some scarlet red and add it to the mix. Why do I add red now? Because there are areas that should be less shaded than others. For example, if in this area we put the blue and black, there will be a very abrupt change. So if we add a little red, we create a shadow that's not too strong. Now, these deeper areas, the color has to contain more blue and black. Shallower parts, we add some red to lower the intensity of the shadow. This is a laborious process, so be patient. And here you can see the final result. All the grooves painted to give us that definition. Light outline. The first step is to add all of the colors to the wet palette. Pure red from Surface Primer by Vallejo, dark red from Model Color, and ice yellow. Here's a link to the previous video where I explain how to paint this blood angel with an airbrush to remind you of the process. I also add some matte medium because pure red is satin and we have to lower that intensity. And, well, you can see in the box that I am making all of the mixtures of the previous steps from the first video. Now we will define the plates even more, especially all the light. Very important when applying these highlights that the paint is very thin. The reason is because we painted this armor with the airbrush, and what does that mean? That the paint is applied very thin, so if we now apply thick paint with the brush, there will be a very drastic change between the airbrush and the brushwork, and we do not want that. What we want now is for the brushwork to not be very noticeable. So we are going to apply the highlights very thin to harmonize the whole thing. I highlight the edges to add definition. Notice how I load very little paint and drag it down so I get a soft blurring effect. I apply highlights to the highest areas. Look at how I create a glow here. I add more ice yellow and then mix it. If you find it difficult, use the previous color to blend. Notice the knee's highlight is getting stronger. This edge in the lower part, I do not add too much ice yellow. I use a less intense color. I highlight little by little. Very important to apply the highlights as thin as possible. Notice that in this area, I am reducing the brightness in the center a little to get a stronger color and more contrast. I add some other little sparkles on this plate. Look at the brush stroke. It is something like so we are able to get a proper blending effect. I keep increasing the highlight. If I go too far, I could use the previous color to cover it. Use a fine-tipped brush. If you use a fat brush, you will find it very difficult. This size is perfect for these details. I keep highlighting the edges. As you can see, the leg contrast is stronger. If you remember the last video, we highlighted with the airbrush, but these special bright spots need to be done by brush. So it is very good to work with both tools, airbrush and brush. Can we work with only the brush? Sure. But the airbrush speeds up the process, which is an advantage, so I encourage you to use it. But then, you always have to work with the brush to do these last touches. And a little trick. When working on the highlights and adding ice yellow, we lose some intensity of the red. So it's a good idea to apply glazes during this process. Check out the box. On the left, there is a more diluted red, so when the red loses intensity, I apply a glaze. This way, the red doesn't lose too much intensity. It prevents it from desaturating. By glazing, we saturate the color again. You have to play with the luminosity. As I said in the previous video, red is a pretty difficult color, so it's better to go slowly with the highlighting. If we see the red is getting desaturated, we apply a glaze to recover that saturation of red. The truth is, I really wanted to paint Space Marines. On the next video, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but I will paint a Dark Angel next. I will tell you how to paint Dark Angels. I hope this series of intermediate videos helps you. And remember, you can let me know any questions you might have in the comments. Getting your feedback is the most important thing, to know your opinions, which helps me to improve these videos so they can be more useful to you. The truth is that I thank you for all your support. This channel is growing a lot, and it is all thanks to you. I really did not expect so much support, and I could not be happier. I am super motivated to continue making more videos. Well, you look at how I highlight the chest along the edge, you'll notice it does not contain as much ice yellow as before. It is a less intense color. It has less ice yellow because if we add too strong of a highlight below, it won't be good. So strong highlights with more yellow keep to the highest areas. Notice how I highlight the helmet. I paint the helmet edges. We have to be precise. If I overdo it, I can use the previous color to blend it. I follow the planes of light I painted with the airbrush, and now I highlight them even more with the brush. You see that here I apply a glaze because I highlighted too much. It's a bit of correcting on the fly. I highlight it, I see that it's too much, so I apply a glaze. I create a glare on the helmet. I highlight it and you see it is too strong, so I take the previous color and blend it. I keep blending. That is the way to work. I highlight more and blend again. I keep highlighting. The fact is, painting Space Marines is super cool. The volumes are incredible. Here you can see the final result. With the brush highlights, it is really cool. Shades and shadows. The tones will help us to enrich the armor by adding those shades. And shadows will add more contrast. Pay close attention to the box as I add some more water to the color, since we will apply shadows in the form of glazes. Load a little bit, apply to the surface, and drag it. How do I do the shadows? For the shadows, I add a little more blue, which is a cold color and will give us depth. Look at the leg, a little trick. I first apply the intermediate tone and then the shadow, so both colors blend more easily. Deep areas have more blue added, middle areas we only work with red. As I said, the red loses intensity as we add highlights. It gets desaturated. So with these glazes, I recover that vivid red color a bit. It also depends a lot on the color red you want to paint. So in future videos, I will explain other ways to paint red. Look at the knee pad as I apply the glazes to enhance that area. Then I apply the shadows to the lower parts, but not in the lowest. Notice how there is a little highlight on the lowest part, then a shadow, and then an intermediate color, then highlight. Stick with that. On the knee, do not just paint shadows on the lowest part. Leave a little highlight, not as strong as on the upper area, like this. Let me know any questions you might have in the comments. I read and answer everything. I keep glazing. And you see that little by little, we are creating these super cool tones. In the shadows, intermediate tones, I combine everything. It's a very easy way to work, and you will get different results than the rest of the painters. On this channel, I show you all the tricks. I keep glazing, and you can already see that the contrast is stronger. Notice how I apply a glaze here and let it dry before continuing. That's the right way. If you don't let the glaze dry, we will get nothing. Here comes a little trick. I will use heavy violet. Why heavy violet? It is close to red on the color wheel, and it is a cold color, which will enrich the color and add a bit more depth. Same as with the blue. Write down these little tricks. They'll help you a lot when painting your minis. And by the way, I want to ask your opinion about recording a color theory video. I guess it could be pretty interesting, because I would explain primary and secondary colors, saturation and desaturation, how I paint white, and many tricks. From my point of view, this video would be very useful, but I'd like to know your opinion. So if you're interested in a video about color theory, make sure you comment below. Let's roll on. I keep highlighting. As you can see, the shoulder looks much better with this touch. It is more saturated. This is turning out really spectacular. Notice how I create the contrast here. I add more shadows with heavy violet. It is the perfect color for this. And here you can see the final result. These tones helped us a lot to improve the contrast on the miniature. Magical touches! I will add some white to the wet palette. This is the final step, those last touches which makes the difference in level. I know it is very laborious, but it's worth it to improve. We have to focus on the small details of the armor, fingers, edges. We are defining everything very well, so our armor is super cool. Use a fine brush. I load a bit of white, but I don't use it pure. I add it to the previous color. I will add the so-called points of light. Points of light will make the armor shine more. Apply this paint on little parts of the surface. A big point of light will not look good. It is better to apply little touches or lines. Notice where I apply it, on the head, shoulder pad, the shoulder pad relief, on the knee pad. These are small touches on some parts to make our armor shine more. Check out the upper part of the belt. So we will make that area shine much more. And you can see that they are light touches and change the whole set of armor, that without these glares our armor would be a little more muted. Don't forget to apply very thin paint, since we used the airbrush before, and if we apply too thick paint, it will not look very good. So, very thin paint. Highlight the shoulder relief to add more definition. As I told you, it is a hard process, but the result is worth it. I keep highlighting. I can add some little lines, very soft lines, to add some texture to the armor. What do you think of these points of light? Do you notice the difference? Leave your opinions in the comments. I think it's worth spending the extra time so that the armor is even better. Here you can see the final result. I hope this video helps you a lot. First video, work with the airbrush. Second video, work with the brush to define everything. This Marine is now ready for battle. What did you think of this process? Easy, right? But I'd like to know your opinion, so leave a comment on the video. If you want to know more about this method, you can find out in my books. You can get them on my website. If you want to support such a cool channel, hit the like button, share it with your friends, and ring the bell to be advised of any updates. And don't forget that in the video description, there is a full list of the products that I use. If you live in Spain, you can get all the products at Goblin Trader, in France at Hobby Shop, and in the United Kingdom at Element Games. See you in the next video!